Blog Talk Radio.
Welcome to our program on Kardec Radio. And now, here's our host, Dr. Vanessa Anceloni.
Welcome, dear listener, to Kardec Radio. Today the show is about the mediumship of Edgar Cayce and his health readings. Why not? God has sent many messengers. Christ himself counts on many of us to help in the harvest of love on the earth, to build a new era of happiness. And here we have with us Peter Woodbury to discuss about the amazing Edgar Cayce and his health readings, his mediumship. Peter Woodbury is a Harvard University graduate and a psychotherapist who focuses on the use of spirituality and faith as tools for transformation. His grandmother, who was a medium and lived a long life, 107 years of age, influenced much his spirituality. He is a popular ARE International Tour leader and speaker on Edgar Cayce. You are going to listen much about the legacy of Edgar Cayce here, and we hope you really enjoy and get inspired, because we understand that there is much to know about this type of mediumship, a mediumship that Kardec himself explained in the Spirit's book. When we talk about the emancipation of the soul, he talked about the somnambulists. It's a type of trance that you get to be unconscious. In question 431, he talks about somnambulists that may bring knowledge that is so precise that we may ask, where does this knowledge come from? And the illuminated minds replied to this question 431 of the Spirit's book. It just so happens that somnambulists may actually possess more knowledge than you think, but it is dormant. Their corporeal envelope is too imperfect for them to be able to remember such knowledge. But who are they, after all? Like us, they are spirits who have incarnated to fulfill their mission, and the somnambulic state into which they enter awakens them from their mental lethargy. We have repeatedly told you that humans live many lives, and when they reincarnate, it causes the material laws of what they had learned in a previous life. When they state what you call the crisis state, they remember what they already know, but always incompletely. They know, but they cannot say where such knowledge comes from or why they have it. When the crisis passes, the memory is erased entirely and they return to their waking state knowledge. Experience has shown that somnambulists also receive communications from other spirits who transmit to them what they must say and supply them with that they lack. These are many of the explanations that Kardec and the illuminated spirits give in the Spirit's book about this type of mediumship that Edgar Cayce certainly had. To know more about it, just hold on, and after the break and after this beautiful inspirational message, we'll to share with you the beautiful legacy of Edgar Cayce.
Prayer of Service. Lord, teach us to walk the enlightening path of service. Give us the strength to destroy the heavy fortress of our wrongdoings, the courage to pave the way to freedom from ourselves, and the means to unlock our hearts in favor of our neighbors, surrendering to them at last the treasures of love with which you entrusted us. Wherever we walk, may pain become less hurtful, ignorance less aggressive, hatred less cruel, darkness less dense, lethargy less shadowing, intolerance less destructive. If we do not yet possess the positive qualities to enrich our terrestrial journey, help us to mitigate the injustices that surround us. May we, in your name, distribute fraternity and renewal, and use with happiness the sublime and invisible gifts of silence, comprehension, and renunciation. Lord, who taught us without words the supreme lessons of simplicity in the cradle and of sacrifice in the cross, leading us toward spiritual development and divine resurrection. Guide our uncertain walk and help our sanctified propositions, so that your will, merciful and just, be unto us, with us, and for us, today and forever, wherever we may be. So be it.
We will return to our program after these messages.
Would you like to liberate yourself from your life struggles or to find inner balance? The Inner Journey CD has 3 beautiful visualizations that will help you bring harmony to your life. As Joanna DeAngeli tells us to, live in a way that you leave enlightening footprints in your pathway as if they were stars pointing out the pathway to happiness. To find this CD, go to the bookstore on the Spiritist Society of Baltimore webpage, www.ssbaltimore.org. That is www.ssbaltimore.org, and start your inner journey today.
Nourish your soul with Kardec Radio.
A new great book and tool for kids and educators. The children's book, Our Father by the Spirit May, psychographed by Chico Xavier, is available for purchase at www.edisayofamerica.com. Buy your copy today.
And now we return to our program.
Here we are, dear listener, honored for the presence of Peter Woodbury. He is one of the scholars who have been leading the understanding on Edgar Cayce's work, his readings, his amazing legacy. He is a Harvard University graduate and a psychotherapist who focuses on the use of spirituality and faith as tools for transformation. His grandmother was a medium and lived a long life, 107 years of age. And she actually was the one who opened this new pathway for him to get interested in understanding the interface between psychic and the spiritual. He has been leading international and national tours and speaking on Edgar Cayce's perspective. And not only that, but he is the featured presenter at ARE's annual New Year's Eve conference, Our Spiritual Birthright, the Transformative Power of Christ Consciousness in Virginia Beach from December 29th to the 31st. So, Peter Woodbury, thank you so much for being with us at Kardec Radio today.
Oh, you're very welcome. Thank you for having me.
Peter, it's fascinating, the combination of spirituality and also psychology. You have a beautiful family background in which your grandmother must have inspired you a lot. How did it happen for you to go being a Harvard graduate and then opening up a new pathway of understanding and of work with Edgar Cayce's works as well? How did it happen for you? How was that journey?
Well, according to Edgar Cayce, Edgar Cayce's readings spoke about reincarnation, and he said that we chose our families because of a particular life path that we wanted to follow. So if I chose my family, if we take that premise, both my parents were psychiatrists. They were both Catholic, and it was actually my mother's grandmother. It was my great-grandmother who was a medium, and she lived to be 107, so she outlived my own grandmother. And so those 3 influences were very strong in my life. I remember going to visit. Her name was Doña Chere, my grandmother. My mother was Puerto Rican, and we'd go to sit down in her living room, and oftentimes she'd say, "Oh no, not there, Peter. Your Uncle Herman is sitting there. You have to sit over here." And I didn't see anybody, and I got curious about what she could see that I didn't see. And my parents weren't, they weren't so enamored with science that they believed that sort of thing was impossible. And they weren't so enamored with, the psychic that they wanted me to become the next family medium. So it was very open. And, of course, my parents being doctors, I'm the youngest, my two sisters and my brother are all doctors, and so I was in a path to become a doctor myself. But in college, my mother's brother asked me if I was studying Edgar Cayce, and he was also had gone to Harvard, and he was a prominent lawyer. And so the way that he said that, that I was studying psychology, and somehow I wasn't learning about Edgar Cayce, to him seemed preposterous. So I went to the bookstore, and back then it was the occult section. They didn't have a New Age section. So I found Edgar Cayce in the occult section, and I said, oh, okay, this is from, my great-grandmother's tradition. And so I bought a few books and read it, but it wasn't until some years later, after I had worked my way, I became a social worker instead of a doctor, and I found my way to a lecture where Edgar Cayce was mentioned again, and I read his biography, which many people start with, There Is a River, and that just, I found it brought together so many things I had been searching independently, like the psychological and the spiritual, religious, and the metaphysical. And so for about 7 years, I just immersed myself in Mr. Cayce's work.
Peter, as you're talking about Edgar Cayce, in Spiritism and in Brazil especially, we say that Chico Xavier was one of the greatest mediums of the 20th century. And in the U.S., Edgar Cayce is renowned for his psychic abilities. They say he's a psychic, a medium. So what do you think in that regard, from your studies, from your understanding?
Of defining Mr. Cayce and his gift?
Exactly. Mm-hmm.
Well, he's best known for an ability that he developed to go. He lost his voice when he was about 20 years old, and he lost his voice for almost a year. And so they tried all sorts of things to try to get his voice back. And back then, hypnosis was starting to become a popular treatment in medicine in the United States. And so it was under hypnosis that he began to speak while under hypnosis, but then he'd lose his voice again when he became conscious. And in one of these sessions, he spoke and defined what the problem was with his throat, and he gave the suggestion on how to fix it, how to cure it. He basically said it was a psychological condition that he had, a fear of expressing himself, and that he needed to be given the suggestion to return the blood flow back to his throat, to normal condition, and then he could speak in a normal voice. And this doctor that was conducting these sessions wondered if what he had just done for himself he could do for other people. And lo and behold, that became what he became most famous for. He gave about 15,000 of these readings where he would just be given somebody's name, an idea of where they lived, and he could tap into them and basically answer any question that they had. Most of his readings were for health, but people asked all kinds of things. So that was what he's best known for. But he was born in his waking state very, very psychically gifted. Like he could see he called it the energy patterns that surround people, which we call the aura. Mm-hmm. He was able to see like what you would call discarnates or spirits, and he could if people that we would consider deceased, like kind of like a medium, I guess you'd say. And he could pick up people's thoughts. He was psychic in that way. So he just had, in his waking state, he was very psychically gifted, and then he developed this ability to go into a trance state and answer questions beyond his conscious knowledge.
But he was Christian as well, right?
Yes. He learned how to read by reading the Bible with his mother. So he was a very devout Christian. He did say that if he ever gave a reading that went against his faith, his Christian faith, he would stop giving readings. And when reincarnation came up as a theme in his reading, he stopped giving readings for a while because he was trying to reconcile reincarnation with Christianity.
And then what happened?
Well, he realized that God is greater than any religion, and that no religion has the whole package. Kind of like the three blind men who touched the elephant, and they each touch a different aspect of the whole. So he got comfortable with that Christianity hadn't really tapped into that element of God's plan, And then he read the Bible every day, and so in his readings of the Bible, he came across passages that he believed could allude to reincarnation, like when Jesus says, "Behold Elijah," and the apostles say they know that he meant John. So he realized, or some reincarnation people think that that's an allusion to John was a reincarnation of Elijah. There's other ways of interpreting that, but there's several little hints that Jesus may have alluded to reincarnation.
And I think he was very insightful, Peter, because in the Gospel According to Spiritism, Kardec talks about that passage and other passages as true moments in which Jesus talked about the law of reincarnation as something we're subjected to.
Yeah.
Yes, it makes sense.
Yeah. Yes. So he never, when he would go to church and he would teach Sunday school, he didn't make a big thing about his unusual beliefs. But when his biography came out, he was kicked out of the church. He was told they didn't want him teaching Sunday school anymore. And so that was a hard time for him because because apparently he was a very good Sunday school teacher.
Wow. Yeah. Nowadays, people in neuroscience have proved that social rejection hurts like physical pain. So
yes.
I bet that was very hurtful, especially because of it talks about the core of your belief, and it seems so paradoxical, this type of behavior. But, right?
Yes.
So, Peter, in regard to Edgar Cayce, so we could say that he was really a man ahead of his time.
Right?
I
would say so. Well, I think since he was a devout Christian, he asked a lot of questions about the life of Jesus and the Christian religion. I believe that if he was a Buddhist in his waking state, we would know a lot more about Buddha. But since he was Christian, there was a large focus on Christianity, and so in a way he put Jesus in a way also ahead of his time, and he alluded to the time that we're in as kind of the basically Jesus was killed for his radical teachings about love and forgiveness and that sort of thing. But he says now is more the time that Jesus spoke of, where we're beginning to have some of the capacity to actually put that into effect. So I would say Edgar Cayce was ahead of his time, but in a way he was also trying to follow that thread of the Christ consciousness in our time, and in his time, and then in this current time as well.
And the way he brought the teachings of Jesus is very different, though, of course, it has parallels with the traditional Christian mentality, but it's a different Christ in the sense that it seems a much more sublime view of Christ when he talks about the Christ consciousness, about this.
Yes.
Can you tell us more about how he portrayed Jesus?
Oh, yes. It's parents are Catholic, and I went to Catholic schools, and the Jesus that Edgar Cayce talks about would not have made me very popular in my religion classes. Cayce talked about how Jesus had past lives, and that he also he separated Christ's consciousness. He said Christ is the consciousness and Jesus was the man, and that all of us in a way can bring this consciousness into manifestation. And the Christ consciousness, that word is always a little bit, he made it clear that the Christ consciousness is a consciousness of God in this world that is part of, anyone who's seeking God goes through that consciousness. But in a way, the language makes it sound like it's Christian. So in a way, I wish he had used the word God consciousness, because he talked about how that consciousness was part of the consciousness in the earth in the beginning, and it's been part of our time forever, that we've always been in our path to God, accessing that consciousness of oneness, you could say, or beyond understanding. And he just said that Jesus had tapped into that, and was basically these teachers like Buddha or Muhammad, Jesus, they come to help raise our consciousness so that we can find our way back to God, that the earth really exists in consciousness, and there's the consciousness of separation in this dimension, and that the path back is to realize that it's only separation is only like a station on your radio, and that there's other radio stations, and that our source channel is oneness. And we're all one.
Yeah, it's very invitational, very soothing. Peter, we're going to give a short break. When we come back, we're going to know more about Edgar Cayce's readings.
We will return to our program after these messages.
Kardec Radio, live every Saturday at 11 a.m.
Nourish your soul with Kardec Radio.
The International Spiritist Council is organizing and promoting the 7th World Spiritist Congress, which will be held in Havana, Cuba on March 23rd through the 25th of 2013. The Congress theme will be Charity and Spiritual Education in Building a World of Peace. 150 years of the Gospel according to Spiritism. For more information, please visit www.7cem.org.
Nourish your soul with Kardec Radio.
A new great book and tool for kids and educators. The children's book, Our Father by the Spirit May, psychographed by Chico Xavier, is available for purchase at www.edisayofamerica.com. Buy your copy today.
And now we return to our program.
We're back with Peter Woodbury, who is one of the scholars and experts on Edgar Cayce and his legacy. He's also a psychotherapist and has been helping so many people with talks, workshops, and in many other ways. So when we talk about reaching out to people, Edgar Cayce was very compassionate, right? Can you tell us more about his personality and how charitable and kind? And I am asking you this because our audience at Kardec Radio is so used to listening to all of us saying about the importance of reaching out to others who are suffering and are in need, etc., getting out of the selfishness. And Edgar Cayce was so open and always reaching out. Can you tell us more about his compassionate legacy?
Yes, he, like we said earlier, he really tried to put his Christian faith into action in his life by helping others. And when he found that he had this ability to go into trance to help other people, he wasn't really enamored with that. He didn't really. He wasn't personally fond of losing, control of himself and being subjected to somebody else's will. But he prayed a lot about it, and he said, if this can help other people, I'm going to do it. And he really suffered because of that. I think personally, he made his living for the most part as a photographer, and he would have been much happier, I think, just to be a little anonymous photographer rather than this man who had this strange ability. He got arrested one time for practicing medicine without a license. He was just trying to help somebody, and the husband and the family didn't understand what was going on and called the police. And so he and his son and wife and secretary were all, it was in the newspaper. And so he was off. Then like I said, alluded to earlier, he was kicked out of the church because of what he did, and his motivation was purely to help others.
That's interesting. And he brought to life like more than 30,000 readings. Am I right?
No, I would say about 15,000.
15,000. Not all the readings kept registered and recorded, but when we go to the Association of Research and Enlightenment area in Virginia Beach, these 15,000 are there registered, and they are now serving purposes to help the current community, right? Can you tell us more about what it is, the readings, and how they're mostly related to health?
Yes.
Right?
There's we have copies of about 14,000, and there were another 1,000 that he gave before he started keeping copies. So the association has records, the 14,000, and they're actually available on a CD-ROM, so you could actually buy them if you want to. You can put the readings. It's an enormous amount of work. Like when you actually see the physical readings, they cover 2 walls of a library. And he was giving about 2 readings a day for 40 years of his adult life. It's an amazing amount of work. And like you said, of the 14,000 readings that we have copies of, 2/3 were for health. Most often he would somebody was ill and would need some help, and they found that if they applied what he recommended, that they would get better. A lot of current medicine, I believe, is rooted in his readings, but they don't give him credit because of the way that science thinks about this sort of thing. Like he talked about the use of gold and silver to accelerate the healing from burn, and he gave these readings at the turn of the century. Well, if you go to a burn clinic, a modern burn clinic, they use silver because it does accelerate the healing of burn, but that was supposedly discovered by somebody else after he had given his reading, so we can document that he was talking about this before it was, quote-unquote, discovered by science. So these are some of the little details about him. But he had 2/3 were for health, and then the other third some were meaning of life type questions. He started giving people what we called life readings, so that he would look at from all of he said we'd had tens of thousands of past lives, and he would usually give you access, or he would talk about 3 or 4 of them that may be particularly relevant to what was going on with you currently.
Wow.
And people, you could ask him anything, and he would, people asked about astrology, they asked about Atlantis, they were just dependent on the consciousness of the person, and then he would answer it. But sometimes it also depended on the depth of the mind of the person. Sometimes his questions were very simple, sometimes they were much more complex, and he would allude to it. He's in a trance state, and he would say, oh, how nice, this is a 4th dimensional mind. And then he would, he said ideas are the 4th dimension. So he said, some people can relate to ideas, and some people don't think ideas are useful at all. They're much more practical. So he would say, oh, good, the 4th dimensional mind, and his reading would include a lot of thought that may be a little bit beyond what most people can comprehend.
And when we talk about this psychic work, this mediumistic work, whatever the case is he wasn't alone. He was in this trance state, but he had other people there assisting and helping out. Can you tell us more about it's almost like a teamwork effort?
Yes,
right?
It was very much a team. At the beginning, he worked with these doctors, but he soon found out that he had to be careful who conducted readings, because he put aside his consciousness. And these doctors were charging for his services. They were telling their, giving the remedies to the patients, but charging them for what Edgar Cayce had said and not giving Edgar Cayce any money from that. So he was being exploited. And then his own father, who was quite a character, used to tell him, oh, okay, the neighbor's not feeling good, let's put you under trance. And they'd put him under, and then their father would start to ask him about the horse races. And Edgar, again, any question you asked, he would, and then, if you read the horse race readings, he would say, well, the favorite has an injured ankle. And the favorite isn't going to win this race. It's injured. So this, one of these other horses looks like a much better chance of winning. So it's really, he would just tap into this strange universal source of consciousness.
Oh, wow.
But eventually, because of this issue, he decided he only wanted his wife to conduct the reading, and then he decided that he needed somebody to transcribe the reading. So at every reading that we have a copy of, his wife, pretty much I'd say about 98% of the time, is conducting the reading, and Gladys Davis is the stenographer writing down the reading. Those are 2 people that he trusted very much, and they protected him. And he learned that he was actually not just psychologically vulnerable when he was under trance, but he was physically vulnerable as well. There were times where he didn't come back in the body for several hours, And his wife said one time that she thought that one day he was just going to die right on the sofa. Because he was told he was only supposed to give 2 readings a day maximum, but there were times in his life when he had a hospital, he was giving more, and then towards the end of his life, when he became famous because of his biography, he started giving 8, 10, 12 readings a day because it was during the war, and there was more need for it, or I guess more need, but also he was more known, and so he wore himself out with that.
Wow, that's amazing. You know, when you're talking about his wife and the other person who is there, like a teamwork effort, the importance of trust, because in the Medium's book by Kardec, he talks about how important it is, that unity, that harmony, to make sure that everything that unfolds is safe for the health of the medium and also for the efficacy of the whole process and the productivity, we say, spiritually speaking, as well. So his relationship with his wife was very solid.
Yeah.
That's a good
and
thing.
And then he also advised the person that was receiving the reading to be meditating, to be sitting still, to be praying, not to just be doing business as usual. And he says that was also part of the work, that if the person was more still, you could get more information.
It makes sense, because it's like thought waves, right, that are interfering with the work. But in his life, has he trained others on how to do what he was capable of doing, or he never went that way?
He described the process that he went through. And he said, there was one reading where he said, anyone could do what he did. He said, but they had to be able to put their ego aside. And so apparently that was his main gift, that he could set his ego aside, and that somehow he could then. A lot of his readings apparently were out of his body. I think there were also movement in consciousness, like he talked about a level of consciousness where there's something called the Akashic records, and that he could access that. And then he talked about moving through dimensions of consciousness. He said the level where he would start would be a very dense and a very heavy level, and he would almost talk about the consciousness was very demanding, very that he would see like people as he rose, and they were calling out for his help. It was very much like in despair. And then he would come to neutral levels of consciousness, and then he would come to places where there was a lot of encouragement, a lot of positive support of what he was doing.
That's amazing. And when you talk about the interaction he had with people, personality-wise, how would you describe him?
Well, he, I've read, I think I've read every biography of his, and I portray Edgar Cayce in a theatrical piece. I used to be an actor. So at the 75th anniversary, they asked me to play him. And so I've gone and just read, I've read his son's writings about his father. And he seems that he was, I think you would call him high-strung, that he was a very sensitive person and susceptible to his environment. And he was actually a heavy smoker. And the reading said that he needed, that the cigarettes actually helped ground him, but it said not to smoke more than 5 a day. And he would smoke up to a pack a day. So that's when I think of him as a very intuitive, very sensitive person, but a little bit, he had to be cautious. I think he could get caught up if he was in a negative vibe. That would affect him more deeply than other people. If he was in a positive vibe, it would affect him more also. So I think he, if you look at his life story, it's almost like fame killed him. He was very, he could walk around with, nobody knew who he was. When he was in Virginia Beach, they just thought he was a doctor at the hospital. They had no idea he was the psychic diagnostician. And but when his biography came out, and he became more famous, and there became more requests for readings, and then the sensitive person that he was, he just overextended himself. See, what he said is that he would get about 200 letters a week asking for readings, And he said that those were not 200 letters to him. To him, it was the energy of 200 sick people crying out and begging for his help. So he said he couldn't even sleep in the house with those letters. So he wouldn't just pick out one letter and say, we're going to give a reading, let's just go through it randomly. He would find the letter. He said, okay, where is this letter? All right, this letter's from Mrs. Johnson. We got to give her, and then her son. Oh, this one we got to do. He was so practically attuned and sensitive. That's what I think most when I think about him. But very jovial, very loving, very kind. I've met. There's a woman who works at the ARE. She's in her 90s, and she and her husband lived with Mr. Cayce. And she talks about sometimes how when people would come to the house to meet Mr. Cayce, he knew that all they wanted him to do was go to sleep and give a reading. And so he would try to talk to the people. And he enjoyed people and he enjoyed conversation a lot, but he realized that for the most part people just wanted him to go to sleep. And
funny in a way, right? Because it's like, as you said, there you have to put your ego aside. He's human as well, right? Like all of us, and he has his needs as well of interacting with people, etc. But what can you do? Just like Chico Xavier, as we said, people would come and they love him, but they love him mostly for what he was able to give them, the relief for the suffering. So we're going to give a short break, Peter, but when we come back, we'd like to ask you more about how you incorporated Edgar Cayce's legacy in your professional life, okay?
Okay, sure.
We will return to our program after these messages.
Kardec Radio, live, every Saturday at 11 a.m.
Nourish your soul with Kardec Radio.
A new great book and tool for kids and educators. The children's book, Our Father by the Spirit May, psychographed by Chico Xavier, is available for purchase at www.edisayofamerica.com. Buy your copy today.
Kardec Radio, to learn more about Spiritism.
The newest edition of the Mediumship book by Allan Kardec is now available. Purchase your copy online or via your ebook reader. Simply go to www.edicofamerica.com today.
Nourish your soul with Kardec Radio.
Join us every Thursday live, Evolution in Two Worlds, a journey of the soul through the teachings of the Spirit Doctor, Andrea Luiz. Connect at www.tvcei.com, Channel 2.
Nourish your soul with Kardec Radio.
Spiritism for Everyone, the online study of the Spirit's Book and the Gospel according to Spiritism. Spiritism for Everyone meets every Wednesday evening and Saturday morning using the latest technology in web conferencing. You can join in from any computer in the comfort of your home or office, no matter where you are in the U.S. or the world. Spiritism for Everyone is open, free, and requires no registration. To access the web live meetings, go to www.spiritus.us. Spiritism for Everyone is a program of the United States Spiritist Council.
And now we return to our program.
Dear listener, it's a very enjoying interview. We are here with Peter Woodbury. He's a scholar in Edgar Cayce. He has a lot to share with us, and he's also a psychotherapist. So, Peter, as we were saying before the break, the legacy of Edgar Cayce is really of a legacy of love. He helped so many people and still does through the many people at ARE and professionals like you. How did you incorporate the teachings brought in through Edgar Cayce, his own legacy, into your professional life as a psychotherapist?
Edgar Cayce is considered like the father of holistic medicine, or a forerunner of holistic medicine, because when he would give readings, at the turn of the century, he wouldn't just talk about somebody's physical illness. In a way, he said the physical was just a result, that what's going on with us physically is the result of what's been going on in our mind and of what we've been building in our consciousness. And then he went further and he says that it's on a deeper level, it has to do with our connection spiritually, that are we spiritually connected and alive? And once that, if that spiritual connection disconnects, we cut off from a spiritual consciousness, eventually the mind becomes toxic. The mind has to focus on something. If it's not going to focus on things that are spiritual, it's going to focus on things that are material, and that's not going to be good. The body is going to begin to manifest what he calls dis-ease. And so the way that I work with it a lot, as a psychologist or a psychotherapist, people come in because of depression, anxiety. It's really the way that their mind is making sense of their life. And so I look at the way that people think. I look at their thinking patterns, and if they're open to it, I try to reconnect them spiritually. See, I work a lot with addiction, and the whole anonymous movement. It works on any addiction. It can be Alcoholics Anonymous, it can be Narcotics Anonymous, any Overeaters Anonymous. And the model is that the person has gotten stuck on a material thing, and they're basically hungering. There's an emptiness that they're trying to fill with alcohol, and that the only thing that can fill that is a relationship to their Creator. And so that's Cayce's. Cayce would agree with that completely. And so it's a process of helping people do that. Some people come to see me that are atheists. They don't have nothing and no desire to think about or connect with God. And those are difficult clients to work with, but they come in and I work with them. I work with them where they come from. And so I use maybe different language. I've also become a practitioner of hypnosis, so I begin to help people access inner dimensions where they feel something deeper or more profound. It doesn't matter if they connect that to, say, oh, yeah, I'm learning to touch into a place where everything feels like it's going to be okay. I tap into something where I can feel peaceful, and then that lingers. To me, that's God, but call it peace or just call it joy, whatever you want to. The word doesn't matter. And so that's the way I work with it, just meeting people where they're at. And, the type of therapy I practice known as cognitive behavioral therapy. Mm-hmm. And that's basically, it just means that that we're constructing reality through our thoughts, and we're either on the pessimistic side or the optimistic side, and that optimism is very healthy, and pessimism is not very healthy, and that like the Buddha said, what we dwell upon is what we become. So if you spend all your day worrying about the worst possible scenarios, you're more likely to have those actually happen, because you're missing all the potentials for the good things to happen in life. So there's different books. Like I'm very fond of a book out now called Buddha's Brain, and it's basically it's a scientific way of looking at the same thing that Edgar Cayce talked about. But some people, need to get there through science. Some people can skip science and go right there through religion. Some people don't like religion or science, and they got to go through their own experience. Mm-hmm. So I think every hour I enter a different mind, and I just work with the mind that's there.
Can you tell us more about how the ARE came about and what it offers to date, and how it has been, also the perspectives on the work of Edgar Cayce through the ARE?
Sure. Well, Edgar Cayce's hope, since when he started, from the beginning when he started giving reading, was that these readings were very complex. And so oftentimes there would be very sick people that would request a reading, and his reading would not incorporate just traditional medicine. And so we'd talk about learning how to meditate, working with prayer. There'd be different types of appliances, electrical appliances that were created through this trance source. So his dream was to have a place where all of this could be integrated so that people could actually get the treatment, because a lot of people weren't getting the treatment that they needed. So he made the acquaintance of two wealthy stockbrokers that were actually, Mr. Cayce was helping them make their investments through helping them interpret their dreams. And they funded the hospital. So in 1928, the hospital was opened in Virginia Beach, Virginia. In 1930, the stock market crash began. Other reasons, then the hospital had to be closed. And so then the next project was, what do we do, what comes after the hospital? And in 1931, they started the Association for Research and Enlightenment, the ARE. And it was really they asked the people that had been helped by these readings, what should they do next? And, this is 1931. You did not have a New Age section in the bookstore, and people wanted to be able to meet with like-minded people to be able to talk about some of these concepts. And so every year they began having a meeting where people could come from around the country, around the world. And, at the beginning they would just meet at Mr. Cayce's house. They called them congresses. And so the ARE has kept this tradition of congresses going on annually, and I think we just had like the 81st or 82nd annual Congress this past June. And so the association is a place where like-minded people can come together and discuss these unusual sorts of New Age kind of concepts. Of course, in 1930, there was nobody else on the block. Now there's lots of New Age options. So we've shrunk. We had a membership of about 100,000. Now we're down to a membership of about 30,000. But the ARE has New Age conferences twice a year. Twice a month. And we have a bookstore. We have a press. We publish books based on Cayce's readings, but we also have a press that publishes books on metaphysical material or matters that aren't necessarily directly connected to Mr. Cayce's work. And there's also an affiliated university called Atlantic University, mostly an online platform where you can get a master's degree in transpersonal studies and learn more about dream interpretation and being a spiritual mentor and reincarnation and these kind of metaphysical sorts of things.
Probably Edgar Cayce himself never imagined it would come to that level, right?
Yeah, he had a lot of doubt. No, he had a lot of doubt about if he had dedicated his life energy to something fruitful. He actually had a dream where he saw the future. I think he saw like 2100, and he saw that the ARE was still in existence. So that gave him some security. That gave him, what's the word I'm looking for? Happiness that it continued to exist.
That's very, very interesting. We're going to go to our last break, Peter.
We will return to our program after these messages.
Kardec Radio, live every Saturday at 11 a.m.
Nourish your soul with Kardec Radio.
The International Spiritist Council is organizing and promoting the 7th World Spiritist Congress, which will be held in Havana, Cuba on March 23rd through the 25th of 2013. The Congress theme will be Charity and Spiritual Education in Building a World of Peace. 150 years of the Gospel according to Spiritism. For more information, please visit www.7cem.org.
Nourish your soul with Kardec Radio.
A new great book and tool for kids and educators. The children's book, Our Father by the Spirit May, psychographed by Chico Xavier, is available for purchase at www.edisayofamerica.com. Buy your copy today.
And now we return to our program.
Dear listener, It's about the legacy of Edgar Cayce with Peter Woodbury. A lot to do with building a new era. Peter, what is in the readings of Edgar Cayce that can be, because he also talked about the new generation, and right, about children who are more insightful, who are more intuitive, etc. Can you tell us more about what is there in Edgar Cayce's works that can give good insights to parents and educators regarding the education of their children?
Oh, there's a lot in there. I mean, the ARE has 2 camps because of his readings about children. They have a summer camp, overnight camp in rural Virginia, and then they have a day camp at the center. And he just spoke a lot about children's curiosity. And Edgar Cayce was spiritual, and his material is spiritual, and so he talked about guiding children spiritually, answering their questions and talking about meaning of life and that sort of thing with kids. And he encouraged parents to use reason with kids, and that he says at the beginning, they may not get it, but if you keep going with that, you explain why you don't like a behavior that they're doing, and then after, if you've had to give them a timeout or something, you come back and talk to them about what happened. He was a big fan of that. He also talked a lot about what he called pre-sleep suggestion. And he says parents, depending on the behavior they're seeing in their children, as the child is going to sleep, they can reinforce positive patterns unconsciously for the child. So if the child is having problems at school or they're fighting with their sister, as the child's falling asleep, you can say, you're such a light, you're such a great kid, you've got so much love to give, I like you so much. And he says that will shift the child's self-esteem in a very positive way. So originally I worked in my practice mostly with children, then I began to work more with adults, couples. But pre-sleep suggestion works with everybody, but it's like magic with children. I could tell you stories of just these cures that sound like something out of the Bible or something. One of the things he talked about families is he says families are soul groups, that people that our family we've been with before, and we've usually come to work together on different things. And sometimes we have lots of problems or issues that we have to work out and forgive. And so his family had all of that. He had been very closely associated with his son Hugh Lynn. Some of it had been conflictual, and that Charles Thomas Cayce, his grandson, had been his grandfather. And so there was another past life family connection within this current family. And so he said that actually with his secretary that she was a twin soul, and that as a twin soul they had been together almost all of their lifetimes.
Very at the vanguard of humanity. In the name of Kardec Radio and our audience, we really thank you much for the time and for sharing what you know about Edgar Cayce, of what you do, and bringing so much hope and optimism, new perspective for us at Kardec Radio.
Oh, thank you. You're very welcome.
Thank you. Dear listener, we hope you have enjoyed this amazing interview. What we need to clarify is that we are bringing the understanding of Edgar Cayce's mediumship because God, as Kardec himself said, sends his messengers through the Christ supervision, of course, on the earth, to all corners of the planet, irrespective of the label. And Edgar Cayce was certainly a medium, a missionary. And when we talk about his type of mediumship, Spiritism explains, addressing one of the questions by our listeners, that the type of mediumship that he had was unconscious. It was this deep state of trance that we call, according to Kardec, the somnambulic trance. If you go to the Spirit book, when you go to the Spirit book and read the chapter about the emancipation of the soul, it talks about sleep, dreams, and different types of trances. It has a whole chapter starting in question 425 onwards about somnambulism. Somnambulism is a phenomenon of the soul. Not necessarily it is mediumship. There is a type of somnambulic state which is produced by the very soul. It's a specific state of the mind and the connection between the spiritual body and the physical body that allows the person in that deep sleep trance state to be freer, to go to places, visit, etc. And according to scientific studies that correlate to the Spiritist teachings, that trance state, the somnambulic state, can allow the spirit to act through the body, through the nervous system, especially the motoric ones, and allow in that trance state to go through riding, walking, etc. That is what we call the anemic somnambulic state, because it comes from the soul. But there is a mediumistic one, which Kardec talks about in question 431 onwards, when he says that in that state, if there is a connection of a discarnate spirit through the incarnate one, that somnambulic medium can receive messages much like Edgar Cayce. And this is quite interesting for us. We will, in the near future, open up a whole show talking about mediumship, different types, etc., with scholars in Spiritism in that regard. For now, we hope you have enjoyed it. And, the Spirit's book has it all. As Mentor Joseph says, the Spirit's book is the constitution of the human soul. If we want to know how we work, there you go. The manual for all of us. The Spirit's book by Allan Kardec, and you can find it anywhere at Amazon.com, at EdysayofAmerica.com, BarnesandNoble.com. Especially nowadays, you can find in ebook format. For now, dear listener, we're going to give a short break, and when we come back, don't go away, because we have lots of beautiful segments by Kristen DeMello. She's going to talk about the law of worship in the Spirit's book when we talk about sacrifices. Nowadays, people, when they are too concerned about their problems, they think, oh my God, I'm going to sacrifice this, that, and the other. And remember ancient times when people sacrificed people to please the gods? How do we understand that? Is that right? Is that wrong? How does Spiritism explain it? Also, Dr. Magalhães is going to talk to us about health and prayer. Our dear Bernadette Leal is going to teach us how to teach children about forgiveness, which is so vital for a healthy life. Without forgiveness, there's no healthy life. And then finally, we're going to end up the show in the highest tone with the new chapter from the book, Jesus in the Home, put together in a beautiful way by the couple, Naur Fonseca and Gabi Ferreira. Stay there, because there is a lot to share and enjoy.
We will return to our program after these messages.
Do you find yourself with no time to stop and read or meditate about Spiritism or spirituality? We have a great solution for you. The audio CD called Unfolding Our Spiritual Nature, Path of Harmony by Ra Tashira is an enlightening CD with a question and answer session as well. Feel the enrichment and purchase your copy today at www.ssbaltimore.org.
Spread the word. Kardec Radio, to learn more about Spiritism.
Learn more about indigo and crystal children with the book The New Generation, The Spiritist View on Indigo and Crystal Children by Devoto Franco with Vanessa Anzalone. Whether you're a parent or not, this book will enrich your mind. Go to www.ssbaltimore.org and click on Bookstore and purchase your copy today.
Magazine is a trimestral digital periodical that publishes the latest news on the Spiritist thought and the movement in the USA and worldwide. Subscribe now at www.spiritistmagazine.com.
Now we return to our program.
Hello, dear Kardec Radio listeners, and welcome back to the Spiritist Moment. We give continuation to Part 3 of the Spirit's book as we are ending the first law, the law of worship. We come towards the end of the chapter where they talk about sacrifice. It's questions 669 through 673 for those of you, dear friends, who want to go and read and study and follow along with us. Well, while we briefly go over this idea of sacrifice, when the spirits bring to us the understanding of how this idea of sacrifice came to develop in the primitive humans, and they explain to us, the noble spirits, that at that time the primitive humans did not understand God as being the source of goodness, and they also didn't understand that a living creature had much more value in God's sight than an inert object. And they said that primitive humans naturally had to believe that a living creature had much more value in God's sight than an inert object. So they even give an analogy of how, even nowadays, when we really love or care about someone, or when we wish to express that love or care for someone, whether it be our spouse, family, or friend, we tend to get a really good gift, very expensive gift, and an expression to say how much that person has value. And if someone really loves me, they give me a really big gift. Well, that idea actually comes from the primitive state of human beings, when humans thought that, well, and we quote from question 669, that the value of the sacrifice was in proportion to the importance of the victim. And the spirits go on to say that generally in life, when you offer a present to someone, you always select one with as great a value as the friendship and consideration you want to demonstrate the person. So it's interesting, dear friends, when we have this type of behavior within our society, and the spirits are explaining to us, this is actually a part of our evolution. It's a way of our expressing our gratitude or our honor to someone else. But we see that even in the primitive humans this existed. But the spirits go on to explain to us that intentions are everything. That even though in question 670 in the Kardec asked the spirits, can human sacrifice performed with pietous intentions have ever been pleasing to God? And the spirits say, no, never. But God judges the intention. So intentions are everything. Because the spirits tell us in this answer to 670 that if truly the primitive humans, their idea was to emulate one of the fellow beings to praise God, that in that case God would have heeded the thought but not the deed. He would have appreciated the thought, but not liked the deed. The good and noble spirits also touch briefly on this idea of holy wars and what should we think about holy wars. And they simply tell us in question 671 that such people are driven by evil spirits, and that by waging war on the fellow beings, they act against the will of God. God, who requires that people love their neighbors as themselves. So they tell us in a very kind way that it wouldn't make sense for God to want others to sacrifice other human beings, because He created us. He created human beings. Why would He want us to sacrifice them in His honor? That is not the sacrifice that He seeks out for His creatures. And dear friends, we end with some thoughts here from 672, question 672, that the spirits asked, did the offering of the fruits of the earth have more merit in God's sight than that of sacrificing of animals? And the spirits repeatedly say to us, and we quote, I have already answered that by saying that God judges the intention and that the deed itself holds little importance. Offering the fruits of the earth rather than the blood of victims would obviously be more agreeable to God. As we have told you and always repeat, a prayer said from the bottom of the heart is 100 times more pleasing to God than all the sufferings you could make. And this is the important part here, dear listeners, that the intention here is everything, the deed, nothing. And we end with these thoughts, that God always blesses those who practice good. Helping the poor and the afflicted is the best means of honoring God. We think about, how do I worship God? How do I honor Him? Well, the spirits tell us this is the way to help, to assist the poor and the afflicted. That is the true way that God wants us to honor Him. Not in sacrificing physical things necessarily, but helping one another. And last but not least, God loves simplicity in all things. So let us remember that, dear friends, as we go on through our day-to-day, and maybe perhaps we may be stuck in erroneous thought and believing, well, I can't do big charitable works. But remember, God loves simplicity in all things. We can be charitable and kind and help the poor and afflicted in the most simplest of ways. So, dear friends, as always, we wish you many blessings, and we wish for you to reflect on these words from the Spirit's book. Until next time, we wish you many blessings.
Hello, dear Kardec Radio listener. Welcome to the segment of Spiritism in Your Life. Following today's show on the amazing Edgar Cayce and his health readings, and especially the use of faith and spirituality for transformation, we'll discuss some of the scientific approach and understanding of the relationship between religion and health. The main questions are, why are people still so skeptical about the effects of religion in our health? And why are some of the well-known studies out there that still puts question marks on this relationship? Hippocrates, the father of medicine, once said that prayer is indeed good, but added that while calling on the gods, a man should himself lend a hand. But why, in modern medicine, it is so difficult to accept positive relationship of religion in our health? There are thousands of studies available that try to answer this very basic question. Does religion positively influence the outcome of diseases? The results are contradictory. Certain papers propose that yes, it is powerful and it's important. Other papers say no, there's no relationship. And some even say that in the contrary, it may actually be detrimental. Let's have a close look in this scientific investigation. First of all, spirituality is a multi-dimensional experience. It is difficult to measure. How do these papers actually analyze spirituality? Well, some of them are going to ask the patient, do you go to church weekly? Do you take part of activities in your church? This kind of question, although it's used as a measurement of spirituality in some papers, doesn't even get close to understanding what is the spirituality of that person. In experiments analyzing prayer, how can you understand whether the prayer is connecting to God or not? How can you understand whether the prayer is just repeating words instead of really creating a connection with our Creator? Let's set another example. It's been shown before that older people tend to be more religious, read the Bible, engage in religious activities. But also they're more prone to have chronic diseases and other health conditions. So when you analyze the population, you may see that people that are more religious may show up with more diseases. If you don't set up very well controlled experiments, that may be a critical error. And many other scientific investigations are poorly designed. Another interesting topic is, how can you measure the effect of spirituality? Is the effect of spirituality the cure of the disease? Maybe not, unless we create a very detailed analysis that takes in consideration, first, the will of the individual to change himself, transform his attitudes, his thoughts, and start to act on the good. Second, the ability of the individual to pray, connecting to God, asking for help of the spiritual friends, but also thanking for the opportunity that he's having. Third, consider that prayer may act in many different ways that we are not even aware of. And fourth, we normally don't understand what we are asking for. Dear listeners, Spiritism brings to us a much more complex understanding of the relationship between our physical body, our spiritual body, and we as a spirit. We understand now that a disease process is most probably a consequence of several decisions and several situations we've been through. So in many cases, the disease is actually a way that our physical body has to clear up some of this accumulated energy. It's actually purging some of the problems that we've been accumulating over and over time in our spiritual body. And in many instances, the disease process is actually decided by ourselves in the spiritual world as a way for us to come here and learn and evolve a little bit more. So if you design a study that asks you whether praying is going to cure you on your physical disease, you may never find a specific relationship. You may never find an answer. So let us today finish with the passage from the book, Our Daily Bread, by the Spiritual Emmanuel, that says, prayer. Devote yourself to prayer, being watchful and thankful. Paul. Many believers would like to use the prayer as if they were mobilizing a broom or a hammer. They expect immediate results without being aware of any prior preparatory effort. Others persevere in the repetition of the prayer while frightened and in anguish. They waste effort and consume valuable energy in an unjustifiable affliction. They visualize only the evil and the shadows, and never take the time to examine the tender young sprout of the divine seed or the close or remote possibility of goodness. They incarcerate themselves on the wrong side, and sometimes lose an entire existence without the effort of transferring themselves to the right side. What probability of success could be provided to the needy one that shouts out a prayer with evident symptoms of an imbalance? A prudent concessionary to begin with will delay the solution, prudently awaiting serenity to return to the petitioner. The words of Paul in this sense are clear. Devote yourself to prayer, being watchful and thankful. It is imperative to recognize that to praise is not solely the utterance of beautiful expressions. It is also to be happy while in actual combat for the victory of goodness, expressing gratitude to God for the motive of the suffering and sacrifice, seeking to find advantages that adversity and the efforts brought to the Spirit. Let us ask Jesus for the gift of peace and happiness, but let us not overlook glorifying the supreme designs. Each time that His merciful and just will clashes with our inferior objectives, let us be convinced that a prayer contrived of desperate thoughts and inopportune demands is destined to the renovating floor as occurs to an unproductive flower that the winds blow away. Thank you very much, my friends, and God bless us.
Welcome to our Youth Education and Spiritism with Kardec Radio. I am Bernadette Leal, and I'll be spending a few minutes with you, inspiring to bring a spiritual awareness and spiritist teachings to our youth, parents, and educators. Today, I will answer 3 questions about children and forgiveness. First question: how can I help my child to understand the benefits of forgiveness? Forgiveness is a very abstract concept. Many parents encourage their children to forgive, but it may not be as easy as it sounds. Piaget explains that children between the ages of 7 and 11 are in a concrete operational stage, and certain abstract and spiritual concepts are hard for them to grasp. The age of 12 is when they can begin to comprehend or show more interest about forgiveness. But even though some young children cannot fully understand it, parents should start to practice with them the act of forgiving and apologizing. Let's take a look into the concept of forgiveness. To forgive means to pardon, to waive any negative feeling or desire for punishment. So, before teaching our children about forgiveness, we invite you to take a look at yourself and recall a time in which someone hurt you, or you felt offended by what he said or did. The question is, why do we get hurt? Why do we have such a hard time letting go of what happened and hold grudges? Well, the answer is because of the ego. Our ego is hurt. We have high expectation on how people should act and say. Consequently, we feel that we are right and the other person is wrong, showing that we have low tolerance of others and being judgmental by noticing people's defects before seeing our own. This is not different in a child or a teenager. They get easily frustrated and hurt because their expectations on people and situations. Since they are young and immature, it is hard for them to accept that people think and behave differently than they do, making it hard for them to forgive at first. As Paul the Apostle said in the Gospel according to Spiritism, absolute and unconditional forgiveness of all offenses is a distinguishing trait of great souls. Resentment is always a sign of lack of spiritual progress. Take a look at Jesus, for instance. He did not take anything personal. Even though people at his time attacked him, he was not offended by their actions or felt he had to forgive them for what they did. He fully understood the person and was able to look with compassion deeply into his soul, see his struggles and limitations. Instead of judging, Jesus loved everyone. He truly practiced love your neighbor. Second question, what should I do to help my child to forgive? It is important to teach and practice with our little ones how to apologize so they can learn the behavior. As they get older, between the ages of 7 and 11, we can help them to deal with their feelings as they forgive or ask for forgiveness. In a situation in which a child is struggling to forgive someone, keep in mind that he's hurt, upset, maybe angry, and probably feels that he has not done anything wrong to deserve it. Seeing himself as a victim, he struggles with his feelings, and therefore he will not be thinking about forgiveness at first. The idea is to guide the child to release his negative feelings so he can approach the situation with less emotion about what happened. Talk to your child about how he feels. Depending on the age, ask him to draw or write about his feelings. Use some concrete material. For instance, you can have a box and label it the Letting Go box. Then, on pieces of papers, instruct your child to write words about his feelings, sentences, drawings, and put them inside the box. As he does it, remind him that he's letting go and letting God take care of his worries and feelings. Next, ask your child to write the name of the person who hurt him and also put it in the box. After that, say a prayer together, asking God to help your child to let go of his struggles, troubled feelings, bring healing, and also pray for the person who offended him. Every day, take some time to address the box by reading the sentences and words, talking to your child about what he wrote, and praying. Soon, he will see that he no longer feels the way he used to about the situation and the person who hurt him, making it much easier to forgive. Another example inspired by the book The Worry Tree is to create a forgiveness tree. Have the outline of a tree on a poster board and tape it on the wall. Then draw and cut tree leaves of different sizes and ask your child to write on each leaf a feeling and what is upsetting him. Next, tape each leaf on the tree so he can see or read what he wrote. Always remember to pray with your child, asking God for inner peace. Once your child overcomes some feelings, take the leaf related to that feeling and replace it with one leaf that says peace. This is a great visual tool because children can see their progress till the tree is all filled up with peace leaves. In a situation in which a child is asking for forgiveness, he needs first to be able to put himself in the other person's shoes to sincerely apologize. Ask him how he would feel if someone had done that to him, and then talk about feelings. Read stories about forgiveness, give examples, and allow some time for the child to think about what he did. Feeling sorrowful is the next step toward asking for forgiveness. It is acknowledging that he hurt someone, does not feel good about it, and is ready to make amendments. Another suggestion when your child apologizes is to help him to reflect upon his action by nicely asking him to say why he is apologizing, and also have the person who was hurt to share how she feels. Third question: what techniques should I use with teenagers to help them to forgive? Any visual techniques or concrete material, like the letting go box and the forgiveness tree, are helpful. But with teenagers, you can go deeper into the issue, using more reasoning, and have a positive discussion. It is easier for teenagers to ask for forgiveness and apologize, because they have already developed some moral values and a better understanding about the consequence of their actions. On the other hand, they struggle more on forgiving someone who hurt them. They get stuck into the drama and on what happened, blaming others and feeling they are victims. Plus, nowadays with social media, teenagers share their personal feelings and events online, and as a result, many of their friends feed their frustrations, increasing their anger and negative feelings. Therefore, do not expect that a teenager will forgive someone overnight. Just accept that it may take a little longer compared to a child. One helpful technique that you can use with teenagers and also with adults is the steps of forgiveness. This is a very positive approach so they can see where they are and how they progress. Here's what you do. Draw 10 steps as if you were going upstairs. Explain that they will be working on the steps to get inner peace and toward forgiveness. There is no rush, as they may take as much time as they need meditating and working on the stage they are. Here are the steps. Number 1, anger, upset. It is how you feel at the moment. Number 2, revenge. You may feel that the other person should suffer or pay for what he did to you. Number 3, awareness. You begin to realize that the negative feelings are not good for you. Number 4, reflection. You think about what led the other person to act that way and how you reacted. Number 5, want. You realize that it is not good for you and begin to think about forgiveness. Number 6, willing. You are willing to give the first steps toward forgiveness. Number 7, ready. You are ready to forgive and think about what to do to get there. Number 8, start. You start taking actions in order to forgive. Number 9, letting go. You can talk about what happened without any hurt feelings. Number 10, free. You feel peaceful and completely forgave yourself and others. Teenagers may take longer in one step than another, but important is that they can see their progress throughout the forgiveness process. This is a great tool for life. Also, prayer is fundamental, encouraging them to pray for guidance, patience, and healing. Kardec Radio listeners, How many spirits have been suffering in the spiritual realm because they left the material world without forgiving someone for their wrongdoing? We should follow Jesus' example as he said on the cross, "Father, forgive them, for they don't know what they are doing." Forgiveness brings us balance. Forgiveness brings us peace. Let's be an example of forgiveness for our children and teach them to forgive without limit. Not 7, but 70 times 7. Chapter 10 of the Gospel According to Spiritism by Allan Kardec brings us wonderful teachings about it, as it says, to forgive your enemies is to become deserving of forgiveness yourself. To forgive friends is to show true friendship. To be able to forgive offenses is to show that you are better than you once were. Thanks for listening to Yes. And if you have any questions that would like us to answer, please email them to kardec@kardecradio.com.
Good morning, dear Kardec Radio listeners, and welcome to one more program with God at Home. I am Naor Fonseca.
And I am Gabi Ferreira. Today's lesson is from the book Jesus in the Home by the Spirit Neo Lúcio and psychographed by Chico Xavier.
Do you believe that God is concerned with every creature, every one of us? Do you think that every prayer is answered? So the answer to both of these questions is yes. But to understand better how every prayer is answered, we need to listen to the following story.
An old teacher of the Divine Commandments was on a mission of heavenly truth from distant village to distant village, accompanied by his dog. One night, darkness began to fall without him having determined how many miles separated him from his next destination. Noticing that being all alone in the middle of nature was quite frightening, he prayed for protection from the Eternal Father and continued on his way. When the moon last night finally set in fully, he saw a wide and comfortable-looking hollow by the side of the path. Petting the dog that was following watchfully behind him, he decided to lie down and sleep. He was just about to settle into the hollow when a dark cloud of voracious flies attacked him all of a sudden, forcing him to continue on his way.
The old man continued walking when he came to a deep creek on a stretch where the road forked. A rustic bridge offered a way across it on the main road, and just beyond it, the ground looked welcoming, because although it was enveloped in nocturnal darkness, it looked like a broad white sheet. The holy preacher decided to lead his obedient companion to the other bank, but the bridge suddenly gave way, collapsed, and broke into pieces.
With no other way across, the old man took the other path, and finding a healthy tree full of welcoming branches, he thought about conveniently taking shelter under it, because from the sounds of thunder in the distance, the sky was announcing a storm. The stately tree offered an alluring and safe shelter in its hollow trunk. He was ready to take up refuge there, but a gale began blowing so strongly that the tree came crashing down and split apart.
Thus exposed to the rain, the traveler continued on his way. After approximately 2 miles, he came across an old country house that appeared to have a soft light on inside, and he breathed a sigh of relief. He knocked on the door. The gruff man who answered refused him in no uncertain terms, alleging that the place did not welcome visitors in the middle of the night and that he was not allowed to take in strangers. He begged and pleaded, but the preacher was forced to continue onwards.
He got as comfortable as he could beneath the storm near a small hut. Soon, however, the dog, terrorized by the incessant lightning, ran off yelping, becoming lost in the darkness. Now alone, the old man wept in anguish, believing that he had been forsaken by God. In the middle of the night, he heard muffled yelling and cursing, but was unable to tell where it was coming from.
Curious, he waited for dawn, and after the sun began to rise in its full splendor, he left his hiding place and found out from some terrified farmers that a band of thieves had pillaged the very same house that he had been turned away from, and had killed the people who lived there. A sudden spiritual light bloomed in his mind. He realized that divine goodness had saved him from the evildoers, and that when the howling dog ran off, he had been assured a peaceful night's sleep.
When told that he was on the path heading in the opposite direction of where he wanted to go, he retraced his steps in order to get back on the right road. When he got to the broken bridge, a repairman explained to him that the white soil on the other side was nothing more than the treacherous swampland where many careless travelers had died.
The old man gave thanks to the Father for having saved him, and when he reached the fallen tree, a young boy told him that the seemingly welcoming tree trunk was a well-known wolf's den.
Very thankful to the Lord, who had so miraculously helped him, he sought out the hollow where he had tried to rest. In it, he found a nest of poisonous snakes.
Offering endless thanks to heaven for the different forms of help that he had been unable to understand at first, he continued onwards, safe and sound, to carry out his work.
The Father always hears our pleas, but we need discernment in order to understand His answers and put them to the best use. We often are not able to understand the divine response to our prayers. We lack a broader spiritual perspective of the events in our lives. By studying Spiritism, we learn that the universe is governed, that there is no such thing as chance, and that benevolent, wise, and pure spirits execute the will of God and guide us in the direction of progress, goodness, and love.
Begin each day with a prayer asking for God's blessing, and end your day with a prayer of gratitude. Next time something upsets you, try to listen to the heavenly response in your life.
Thank you for listening to Kardec Radio, broadcasting live every Saturday morning at 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. Email us and share your comments at www.kardecradio.com. Until next time, we wish you many blessings.